I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. Then I was reprimanded by the fake news. They said, what about love, religion, and God? I said, I agree. Let's put God number one. Let's put religion number two. Love, I don't know. We got to put that number three, I guess, right? And then it's tariff.
President Donald Trump is now placing a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, not just from China, but from literally all other countries. Cenk, are you worried about your, I know you've said in the past you have an ass of steel. Are you worried about your ass costing more?
No, my ass is homemade. So it's only gonna get stronger. Okay, so.
No competition from the international market.
At first I got discombobulated because I thought you said abs of steel. And I'm like, I do not have abs of steel. Ass, yes. Okay, so seriously.
This is a serious story.
This is a very serious story about tariffs, guys.
Okay.
Okay, what are you having a good time for, huh? What's the matter with you? Okay, in a minute, I'm gonna tell you which of the tariffs I agree with, which of the tariffs I've got the jury's out on, and which tariffs I don't agree with. So that'll be fun.
Okay, so look, these tariffs are not going to be implemented immediately. The tariffs will begin in March 12th to be exact. And to me, that signals that this might just be another bargaining chip, a way of Trump negotiating other deals in the international markets. So we'll see what comes of this. But here's what we know so far. Trump argues that these tariffs on steel and aluminum are necessary because some other countries subsidize their steel industries, thus allowing for the steel that the United States imports from the international market to be sold much more cheaply. And that hurts the steel industry here in the United States. So who are the big winners and losers of these tariffs? Well, the big winners are US steel manufacturers, just based on what they are telling the press. So Kevin Dempsey, the president of the American Iron and Steel Institute, said the group welcomed Trump's continued commitment to a strong American steel industry, which is essential to America's national security and economic prosperity. US iron and steel producers are operating at only 70% capacity. The first Trump administration aimed to get to 80% and did so briefly, but underpriced Chinese exports have taken a toll on domestic producers in recent years. Now look, I should note that the Biden administration actually maintained the Trump administration's tariffs on China, and in fact expanded upon them so they would impact the EV industry and stuff like that. And so Biden took a look at what Trump did with tariffs, apparently liked it and continued it. But in this case, we're talking about a tariff on steel and aluminum that impacts any other country in the international market that seeks to export their steel or aluminum. So that could have more of an impact. Now, on the other hand, domestic manufacturers that use cheaper foreign metals in their factories are obviously unhappy about this announcement. So the National Foreign Trade Council, an industry group for large US companies, said Trump's move could harm competitiveness and increase costs paid by American manufacturers, and that could lead to higher costs for American consumers as well. And there is truth to that, right? Like if we're getting steel imported from other countries, that is going to compete with steel that's obviously manufactured here in the United States, and that could lower prices overall. Less competition typically means higher prices, higher tariffs usually get passed on to American consumers. But honestly, it really remains to be seen what Trump's real plan is here. You shouldn't take what he announces as his initial plan should not be taken as what he actually wants to do. Usually he likes to bully other countries to renegotiate previous trade deals that are more favorable to the United States. So we'll see what happens. But of course, companies in other countries that sell steel and aluminum to the United States are not happy about this. US net imports make up more than 4/5 of the country's aluminum requirement and about 17% of its steel needs, according to figures from Morgan Stanley. In 2024, Canada was actually the leading supplier of imported steel to the United States. Brazil came in second, followed by Mexico, South Korea, and Vietnam. Now, the United Steelworkers Union, which has members in Canada, said it welcomed Trump's effort to help the industry, but that Canada is not the problem. By the way, Canada is also a big supplier of aluminum to the United States. And look, while China does not directly import much steel to the US, Chinese steel does enter the United States in kind of like a roundabout secondhand way through other countries. So China makes as much steel and aluminum as the rest of the world combined. And in the 1940s, the US produced half of the world's steel. Things have changed since then. Now we produce less than 5%, Cenk.
Yeah, so I want to give you context on the tariffs here, because there's some tariffs that I think make sense and others that I don't think make sense, and this one is kind of in the middle. So he also announced reciprocal tariffs. So if any country has a tariff on us at a certain percentage, we're going to raise, if they're not already at that percentage, we're going to raise our tariffs to match their percentages, okay? I've always been in favor of that. I was in favor of that before Trump. I'm in favor of that with Trump.
Agreed, yeah.
So, but I'm curious what you guys think. So we have a poll on that. So if you're watching the show live, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day, we do these live polls in the chat. And we've got, look at that, 52-48, real close on reciprocal tariffs. So, and I'm curious what Bernie thinks about it too, because I suspect that he's in favor of it, but I don't want to speak for him, okay? So now on the other hand, when he did that rando tariff on Canada and Mexico right out of the gate, based on they let too much fentanyl in or something, that was so random and totally useless and ridiculous and would have started a trade war for almost no reason, right? And the fentanyl problem is mainly a demand problem, et cetera, right? So some of the tariffs are just senseless and counterproductive. Some make sense. And now the steel one, well, look, the jury's in a little bit on the tariffs he did in the first term, which Anna's gonna tell you about in a sec, right? So I get that it could and often does raise prices for other goods that use steel and aluminum in this case. On the other hand, it does protect your home industry. Is it a resource we need for national security? Those are good, legitimate questions. Now, if you're a Democrat and you've been told that you have to hate everything Trump does and that everything he does is by definition what a Nazi would do, remember what Anna said. Biden actually, not only did he keep those tariffs of Trump's, he actually increased them a little bit. So if Trump was a Nazi in his first term with those tariffs, then Biden was Nazi plus.
In fact, Foreign Policy Magazine did a really interesting write-up about the debates that were happening within the Biden administration in regard to Trump's tariffs, because they were under the assumption that it was leading to inflation, and they did an analysis and they're like, oh, it's actually not leading to inflation. And we kind of like being tougher on China, so they kept the tariffs and they expanded on them. But look, obviously there was an analysis done to see whether or not these tariffs were hurting the American people. And when they found out that it wasn't, they decided to keep those tariffs. Trump did it right the first time in regard to the Chinese tariffs. The question is he gonna overstep? And by the way, he was specifically asked, are you worried about retaliation as a result of these tariffs? Asked about the threats of retaliation by other countries against his new tariffs, Trump said, I don't mind.
That's the usual tough guy talk he does. And by the way, if you're gonna go all in like this, then you should say things like, I don't mind, have at it, Hoss. Right.
And by the way, I mean, Europe, they wanna play tough, but my read is they're panicking about tariffs and have threatened the United States with huge tariffs on whiskey imports. Oh, what are you gonna you're gonna live without Tennessee whiskey? Really? European Union? You're not gonna do that.
No,
motorcycles, no, they are. I'm kidding. Motorcycles, things like that. So look, there could be a pretty nasty trade war ahead. It remains to be seen. We're gonna wait and see. But go ahead. Did I interrupt you? You were finishing.
No, I agree with you. Look, they were gonna do 50% tax on whiskey, for example, and our whiskey producers, sorry, are panicking a little bit here. And if you remember through all the different tariffs in the first term, then they hit us, the other countries did, with tariffs on our produce. And so our farmers were really hurt. And then we had to do giant subsidies for the farmers to make up for it.
Thank you for reminding me about that. So I learned something really interesting about those subsidies. So remember, the tariffs are paid to the federal government, and then usually the consumers absorb the cost. So the money that the federal government made off of those Trump tariffs were then utilized to subsidize the farmers who had lost business as a result of the tariffs.
Yeah, so then, okay, I get it, but on the other hand, then it didn't really do that much good because the money just went to the farmers. And we already subsidize farmers so much. That's why high fructose corn syrup is in all of our food and making all of us overweight. That's another topic. Look, that's why I say overall, Anna, jury's out. So obviously Biden kept some of these, some of the facts matter, and some of the tariffs seem to work okay. Some of the tariffs did lead to slightly higher prices, including steel.
Yes.
So let's see how this one plays out. This one is not crazy. This one is an interesting economic theory to test out and see if it works or not.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.